Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2, mic check 1, 2.
Good afternoon. It's truly, one of the joys about the conference that we have is that we get to see each other. It's like our state fair. It's a great, grand get-together of supply chain talent, faculty, doctoral students from all over the world congregate at different times and different places. And so we are very, very fortunate that we have this in the Twin Cities. It was supposed to be held during the era of COVID-19 and it got canceled. And so, but we are resilient, right? And so we have this backup here. And so we thank our colleagues who are done a yeoman's job organizing this conference, and we are happy to be part of it. And as a local boy, I'd like to also welcome you once again. Today is still the first day. We didn't plan the weather for you, but I can tell you that it is better than snow. Yeah, you just have to take my word for it. Hopefully, you'll have a good time. This is a good hotel. It's a good location. One of the things this society is very committed to and is to make sure that we also engage our industry leaders, thought leaders as part of our sessions and have dedicated sessions to that effect. And this is truly in the spirit of trying to practice what we at the Carlson School like to think about as engaged scholarship, so that you get to meet, see, understand what's keeping our colleagues and leaders in the industry up and awake. What is that we can contribute because of the freedom and flexibility you have to work on problems of consequence and of contemporary importance. It is in that vein we have today our second plenary session. And the first one was Professor David Semchalevi, which you had, he's a known figure, very respected, and obviously we love to hear his latest thinking and the things he is doing. It's truly been very influential and continues to be very influential. We'll have another perspective today from industry. And again, it's truly my privilege and honor to have with us Mr. Chad Collins, who is the Chief Executive Officer for SPS Commerce. Before I tell so much about Chad, I'll give you a little bit and I'll go on the limb to be, I know little knowledge is dangerous, but SPS Commerce is an iconic technology company in Minnesota, which truly is a supply chain technology company. There's a lot going on in this town in the food and agribusiness, med device health sector, retail, global manufacturing, financial services. People don't realize since you're visiting. But the claim to fame for SPS Commerce is in the retail space, and you'll hear more about it. But effectively, if I were to think about it, it's the world's leading retail network connecting trading partners around the globe to optimize the supply chain operations for all retail partners, and I mean very expansively. The company was founded in 1987. SPS Commerce supports data-driven partnerships with innovative cloud technology, customer-obsessed service, and accessible experts with customers so that they can focus on what they do best. And the real proof of the pudding is sometimes in the earnings announcement, which I'm told just happened. And just to give you some perspective, the value proposition as it is borne out is this is now 93rd consecutive quarters. Can you imagine? They have survived, not only survived, they have thrived. And that's the value proposition. That's what Minnesota sometimes offers that people don't recognize. The technologies, the industries, tried, tested, resilient, that withstand the test of time. So that's just the real proof. To give you some sense of the scale and scope, and some of these things I might be a little off. To date, more than 120,000 companies in retail distribution, grocery, and e-commerce have chosen SPS Commerce as the retail network. The companies have changed, as you said. I mean, I don't want to misquote, but I think, Chad, you can share a little bit about your revenues, etc. But SPS Commerce EDI, fulfillment EDI was recently named industry's #1 EDI solution based on user satisfaction market presence by G2, the world's largest tech marketplace. So that gives you a flavor for where the habitat that is our CEO is situated, our Chad Collins is situated. Chad joined SPS Commerce in October 2023 as the CEO. Chad was previously the Global Chief Executive Officer for Corber's supply chain software, where he set strategy that shaped the direction of the business and empowered customer service. Corber is a German company, again, with a fairly significant global reach. Chad has spent 20 years in supply chain technology, building marketing, leading businesses, and pushing what's possible in supply chain solutions to enable customer innovation. He began his journey in the industry as a supply chain consultant, working for Capgemini, Ernst & Young, and before he became part of the Corber, and he was also part of another company called High Jump. He was president and CEO, which was then acquired by Corber. So you can also see how some of these companies evolve through growth, the merger acquisition. And it's a wonderful subtext to what's happening and the suite of applications they bring to bear. Chad is a Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering from Marquette University, and he's one of our distinguished, and we are proud of, as an alum of the Carlson School of Management. And I have had the good fortune to have him in my class once upon a time. And truly a joy and a pleasure. Let's give a warm round of applause to Chad Collins.
Thanks, KK, and thank you for having me. It was always a grind. I did a part-time MBA program, so it was always a grind to go from working all day to rushing to the university and taking classes all night. But I'll say, when it was KK's class, it was a joy to go after work every time. So, but thanks for having me. What I had in mind for today was just a few things. For context, I wanted to explain a little bit about SPS Commerce, just so you understood what we did and also the types of customers that we were working with. And then talk a little bit about disruptions in the supply chain. And I know there's a focus here on resilience and disruption-free, and not to be too controversial, but I think we'll make the point that supply chains will never be disruption-free. It's really how you deal with those disruptions that's important. And then as we spend most of our time in the retail supply chain, we'll spend a little bit of time on why these disruptions have been even more challenging in light of the pressure that's on the retail supply chain coming from the Omni channel. And so we'll go into that a little bit and then explain for each of the market segments that we're servicing, which are really retailers or other large buying organizations, the suppliers that they buy from, and then the third-party logistics providers that are in the middle of that, providing all the logistics service. Kind of from each of those three angles, what are the ways that they are affected by these challenges? And then highlight a few of the things that we've seen each of those three segments use as solutions to help address some of the challenges and complexities. And I'll end with a bit of a challenge, if you will, for the academic world and highlight some of the areas that, from our point of view, would be helpful for further partnership between industry and academics. So let's jump into it. Small defect, we can advance the slide just one. All right. So at SPS Commerce, we operate a supply chain network that connects retailers with their suppliers and all the logistics service providers that participate in that buying process, allowing a exchange and a free flow of information across this network using a connect once, access all approach to benefit all of the participants in that network. And we've been doing this for well over 20 years. As KK mentioned, we have over 120,000 customers that have accessed this network and 85 participants in 85 different countries on this network. And although the slide says 92 consecutive quarters of growth, as KK mentioned, we were very proud yesterday to announce in our earnings call our 93rd consecutive quarter of growth. So definitely the world needs a supply chain network like SPS is providing, and I think that's been demonstrated by the success that we've had in the market, growing the network and therefore growing our business. All right. We really service three main market segments on the network. Buying organizations, and these are typically retailers, including grocers and distributors, wholesale distributors and food service distributors primarily. What we think primarily of this is if you're an organization that is buying a finished good and then reselling that same finished good without a tremendous amount of incremental value to that, then you would be a fit for the buying organization portion of the SPS network. The other set of participants on the network are the supplier community. So those that are selling to the buying organizations. And then, of course, often, as you know, there's logistics service providers, whether that's third-party warehousing services or transportation services in the middle of those transactions and supply chain processes that happen between the suppliers and the buyers. And we have sort of a unique go-to-market approach. So we make a commitment to that buying organization to digitally connect 98% of their order volume in what's typically done in a number of weeks. And so we will provide quite a bit of hands and heads and emails and phone calls to outreach to all of those suppliers for those buying organizations with a value proposition to get connected to the retailer. And so while, of course, they want to continue to do business with those retailers and they want to catch those orders digitally, we've also helped identify many ways that by being digitally connected to their customers, those suppliers can drive efficiencies. And for the third-party logistics providers that are connected to our network, one, they can use this as a value proposition to earn more business because they really have a great understanding of how to meet the complex shipping requirements to retailers, but they are also finding efficiencies in their operations by being fully digitally connected to this ecosystem of participants. To just give you a feel for some of the types of customers in each one of these segments, I have the proverbial software salesperson logo slide, but this does give you a sense of just the types of customers that are participating in our network. So I think there's certainly always been challenges in the supply chain, and you could argue with all the innovation from automation to software to academic research that this should be improving, and you should be feeling disruptions and pain points, fewer and less as things go on and we make improvements. Well, I think the challenge to that argument is that no matter how much we improve the supply chain, the expectations of the end consumer just keep increasing. And so, especially during the pandemic, when we saw this massive shift of people finding ways to procure goods in different ways, whether they were buying it online or they were going to the store and picking it up, combined with other just general disruptions that were happening, the general bar in terms of what the consumer expects out of the supply chain is increasing, and retail supply chains are really feeling this first and foremost. And so, although we've all worked very hard at streamlining our customer supply chains and removing things, as long as the pressure stays on from the consumer and the expectations keep increasing, I think these disruptions will continue, because it's like I think of it like a rubber band, right? The tighter you keep pulling that rubber band based on the consumer expectations, the more vulnerable you are then into those disruptions. So we would say that the disruptions are not going away, no matter what those disruptions are. Whether a container ship hits a bridge and leaves all your cargo in a port in Baltimore, whether there's a massive change in the global economic policy, and now all the goods you are importing from China have extremely high tariffs, whether the Suez Canal is blocked. All these things are going to continue to happen. And as we are trying to put more and more pressure on our supply chains to deal with the consumer expectations, everyone's going to be feeling these disruptions. So the real answer is, how can we put in place systems and processes, not only inside the four walls, but I would argue even more importantly, collaborating across all the participants in the network, so that when these disruptions occur, we can react more quickly, and then therefore it's a more minimal interruption in the supply chain. And let's just dive in a little bit into this consumer. So if you look at a typical shopping experience, or a couple extra builds here, if you look into a typical buying experience, the expectation of the consumer has completely changed. So let's just meet Drew here. And all of us can probably relate to Drew. So Drew's looking for a new pair of running shoes. And of course, like all of us do now, he starts his buying process by looking for those online, and he actually puts those on his shopping cart online. And all of a sudden, he gets a disruption from his little toddler and forgets about his shopping cart and walks away. But he still wants the running shoes, so he's at work the next day. And he knows that there's a sporting goods store near him at work. And so he goes into there and he actually buys that same pair of running shoes directly from the store. He picks them up at that store close to work, and he takes them home and he tries them on. And you know what? He doesn't like them. And so he's got another store that's close to his home, but different from the one that he bought them. And so he takes them back to that store and returns those. I think we can all relate to that, and we can all say, well, yeah, I mean, that should work. I should be able to shop for something online. I should go to one store, return it at another. But I will tell you, having worked with many retailers for many years, the transaction processing and data awareness that has to happen behind the scenes here is actually extremely complex. And when most retailers' systems were designed assuming that the only thing you were going to do is come into the store and buy it, and if the off chance you returned it, you were going to come into the same store with your receipt and return it, it's very hard to accomplish this with many of the legacy systems that many retailers have. And so the consumer expectation, though, is really that all of this can happen through a single transaction. And that's really what we're we're driving to, is that in the back end, all the systems and processes are aware that Drew is the consumer, that Drew had a interaction online, that Drew had an interaction in a store, that Drew had an interaction in another store. And so Drew's experience with this whole purchase can look like one transaction. That's the goal. And so to orchestrate that experience, you really do need to look at how all those systems are going to be tied together. And what I'll say is that this is only going to increase. So not only are people now buying in stores, not only they're buying through e-commerce channels, but we have new marketplaces that are emerging. The majority of things that you buy and you think you buy from a retailer's website actually are never physically handled by that retailer. Instead, they are drop shipped to your doorstep by the suppliers that have that, which therefore enables this long tail in the supply chain. And I think these channels of purchasing are only going to increase. There's only going to be continuous innovation in terms of how consumers are purchasing goods. There is only going to be more demand for direct-to-consumer sales, and all of this is going to place increasing pressure on how supply chains operate, and actually, I think, kind of put more pressure even on how the local and last-mile infrastructure in many municipalities around the world will operate to support these new consumer expectations. So really, what is required to put this all together? And we really have identified three things that we think are key that you see on the left-hand side there. The first one is connected systems. So if we go back to that buying example and you don't have connected systems, well, then the e-commerce infrastructure that knew that Drew put the shoes in the shopping cart would not be aware of the fact that Drew then showed up at the store and purchased those through the store point of sale system, and would also not be aware that Drew showed up at another store and processed a return transaction. So really one of the keys is making sure that all the systems that are going to be involved in the supply chain or interact with consumers are connected. The second, and maybe more nuanced, is that teams need to be connected. So, the historical buildup of a retail organization, you would have a store operations team and a separate merchandising team and a separate supply chain or distribution and transportation team, and they wouldn't necessarily work together. But as we're encountering more and more of this omni-channel and more direct-to-consumer demands on the supply chain, it's increasing the need for teams to work together. And then that information really needs to be connected. And I think this is where it's critical, is that not only do you have to have the connected systems, but there really has to be a single view of the information. And that single view of the information has to be beyond the four walls of your organization. So, I've had the blessing and the curse to work in supply chain technologies and supply chain software for over 20 years. And it always strikes me that the vast majority of innovation that happens in supply chain software is tailored toward the four walls of a particular organization. So you have supply chain planning systems that do demand forecasting and demand planning and inventory optimization. You have all the execution systems, whether those are transportation management systems or warehouse management systems. But all of that is really only focused on the four walls of one organization, when supply chains themselves are inherently multi-participant. And so our view is that to get this single view of information across multiple participants in the supply chain, the right technology for that is a network that can have multiple participants come in, play their role on the data, but still provide a single view of the data across all the participants that need to be in the supply chain. So if you look at how that's working within an example network like the SPS network, we have the buyer, the supplier, and all the logistics service providers that are on that network that can get a common view across what are the items, the item attributes, all the inventory information, the orders that get executed back and forth, any variants or changes to those orders that occur. Of course, and this is a critical one, the shipment information, right? So that the supplier can tell the retailer exactly what's coming at them. So they get that inbound supply chain visibility, plus can optimize the distribution operations by knowing what the contents of that shipment are. And then another critical one is sales data. And this is one area that we're very focused on, the benefits. When we can get that retailer to share the point of sale data so that they know not only what the sell to is, so how much they're selling to the distribution center, but what the actual consumer buying pattern is, the sell through that's happening at the store. When you understand that sell through, right, you can get a lot more predictable and efficient in the overall supply chain, kind of taking out this proverbial bullwhip effect that's driven by the sell to data alone. So let's just kind of double click on each of the three major segments that we deal with, and I'll share some of our observations around each of these segments, starting with the retail side. So one of the challenges that we see with retailers is that there's missing information from the retailers. So the retailer would like to make more intelligent supply chain decisions, but what they have is typically a very diverse grouping of suppliers. You know, if you go into a Target store here in town, you're going to find everything from Procter & Gamble products with the most sophisticated supply chain information and systems and years of history developing those capabilities, all the way down to an innovative brand new product that just won their first contract with Target and has no supply chain infrastructure, right? So it's a big challenge then for Target to deal with that vast and wide assortment of products and a vast wide assortment of sophistication in supply chain in their supplier base. And so what they typically find is that various pieces of information that they need to make smart supply chain decisions end up being missing because their supplier community is not able to comply with the types of information that Target requires to make smart supply chain decisions. And so what we find is that 90% of our retail customers are really not getting the essential information that they need to make the right supply chain decisions. And what we also find is that the organizations themselves typically are not set up even to make good supply chain decisions. So we have these segmented portions of the organization, kind of the planning and allocation organization, the physical logistics of the DC and the transportation, the store operations, and then the e-commerce operations. And oftentimes these groups aren't collaborating well inside the organization. And oftentimes that's also driven by them operating off different types of data or different views of data by each one of these functions. And so when we see this, some of the byproducts we see is them dealing with sort of reactive order management. So if there's inventory shortages, or expedited orders, also high cost or inefficient inventory strategies, dealing with a very costly financial process, especially when it deals with dealing with disputes and collections and payments from the supplier community. At the end, the consumer is losing if they get a poor consumer experience. And then really an inability because of this to manage the performance of their trading partners. If there's no consistent data, there's no consistent way to measure the performance of the trading partners and therefore hold them accountable and have them improve over time. So a few other outcomes that companies are challenged with would be really understanding information sharing processes. So if you have this vast supply chain with a number of trading partners, what is really the information exchange best practice Now, some large retailers and some advanced consumer products companies have figured some of this out, but we continue to encounter retailers and suppliers that don't understand the best practices around just sharing information in the supply chain. Also, and this is a key one, even if you know what's right and what you would like to demand out of your supplier community, oftentimes you just don't have the resources to put in these enablement programs in place to ensure that your vendor community can comply, right? I mean, that just takes a lot of people, a lot of outreach to accomplish that in your vendor community. And as a result of that, you typically have a non-performing vendor community. And then finally, just the underlying technology, which, as I mentioned, lots of organizations have lots of supply chain software that's focused on the four walls of their organization, but not technologies that are really helping them collaborate with their trading partners. And so now if we turn to the supplier side, if you look at our ecosystem here, the participants that I actually feel the most sorry for are the suppliers in the retail ecosystem. Because I remember when I started in supply chain and distribution operations, I used to go to a consumer goods company, and it was pretty straightforward. They'd say, we get Walmart orders on Monday and we ship those on Wednesday, and we get Target orders on Tuesday and we ship those on Thursday. And then we get a lot of mom and pop orders throughout the week, and we usually ship all those on Friday. And it worked the same way every week. Well, now if you go into a consumer goods distribution center, not only are they getting all those big store orders and distribution replenishment orders weekly, they may even get multiple weeklies, but they also have to support their own e-commerce operations because most brands have started up their own e-commerce channel. They're also needing to fulfill orders that came in on the retailer's website but are being fulfilled by the supplier. They've also got products that are on Target Marketplace or Walmart Marketplace or Amazon or eBay that are also coming in and being fulfilled. And each one of these customers has their own requirements. And then further inside each customer, each channel that they're supporting within that customer has its own unique requirements. So you can see how this problem really compounds quickly for a consumer goods company to deal with all that complexity driven from all of that. And on top of all that they have on the sell side, they're also typically dealing with a manufacturing supply chain or a complex import supply chain on the back end. So it really is challenging for these suppliers in the way that they do business. So I think if you just, this graphic actually does a nice job highlighting this here, that if you are looking at all of those lines and all of those customers and all those channels, and you have a single line that you need to connect for each one of those customers and each one of those challenges, that gets to be pretty complex pretty quick. And wouldn't it be nice if you could connect to one network that actually knew how to already support those requirements from all those different retailers and all those different channels? So let's click into what the third-party logistics providers have to deal with. So they are really in the middle of this. So these logistics service providers don't operate on that big margins, but are really critical to this whole process, because if you're outsourcing a lot of your logistics, that typically means that you haven't developed your own logistics capability to handle that yourself. I mean, there's always the off chance it's just excess capacity, but what we see in most cases is these organizations that are utilizing logistics service providers, it's because they don't have the sophistication themselves. So now you have an unsophisticated customer, and you have a very sophisticated retailer that you're trying to ship to. And as a logistics service provider, you're sort of caught in the middle of all this. And often this information flow is quite complex because your unsophisticated supplier customer doesn't know what information is important to you to be successful in terms of shipping with the retailer. So the 3PLs are really caught in the middle of all this. So that is the world that we live in when we are interacting with our customers. And probably more importantly, that is the world that our customers are dealing with day in and day out. So we will say, though, that we have come up with a few ideas, and I think thankfully that's led to some of our business success around how customers can deal with this. So here are some of the things that we've come to the conclusion on. The first one would be the regular sharing of information so that everyone has it. So back to this idea that if everyone who is working in this ecosystem can operate off the same information around items and inventory and orders and sales data, that everyone's able to make more efficient supply chain decisions. And so really getting that visibility across the entire order life cycle is really critical and important for all these participants to be able to collaborate and execute their part of the process and work stream to, in the end, get a satisfied customer. The other thing that we've learned is a connect once, access all is the preferred architecture for this information to be exchanged on. So you recall the drawing I had up before with all the lines across all the customers and all the channels. Well, if you could connect in one place and have one pipe in, and then that connection can access all of those channels and all of those customers, and that connection also understands the rules that they require, that is certainly a easier and preferred approach to just connect once to the network and then have all that access. So the other thing that we've learned is that if you can have a single process inside your organization that meets the needs of all of your customers, you will be more efficient. So what we typically see is processes inside the organization that over time get customized to new and one-off requirements for specific customers or specific channels. And this can be quite challenging. If I'm going to process Target orders completely different than I'm going to process Walmart orders, operationally, that really gets to be a challenge. And so to the extent, even though you may have different data requirements for a Target or Walmart, to the extent that you can run your business process consistent across all your customers and deal with the various data requirements using a network rather than being bespoke in the business process, you'll drive a lot more efficiency in the business process. And then go for help, and whether it's help from academics or help from consulting companies or help from technology providers like us who are continually solving customer problems. There is a lot of best practices that are out there around the process, around the implementation, around the expertise that's applied to meeting the complex rule books that retailers have. And what we find is that although this information exists, we still continually find consumer goods companies who are thinking that they're alone, thinking that they're the only company that has to navigate this. And there really is quite a bit of expertise that can help them. So that's the world that we live in. Those are some of the things that we have learned in terms of building a more resilient supply chain. And we would contend not to get rid of the disruptions, but if everybody's operating off the same set of information, we would say that those disruptions could be managed more effectively and more efficiently. And KK knows that I will never come to a classroom or a group of academics without asking for what my view is and how you can help us. I'm going to offer that up here as well. So, I will say our business is growing. We are continually in search of new professionals who have a passion for supply chain that can immediately jump into our customers and have the right fundamentals in supply chain so that they can know the terminology, they can know in general how supply chain works. Of course, the specifics we can teach them, but I would say the more young professionals that academics can produce with a fundamental understanding of supply chain, that is a tremendous benefit, and I see no shortage of need for supply chain expertise. And I would also give you credit for really building out this discipline as I've seen in the last 10 years. I mean, when I meet with young people, university students now, I mean, supply chain is a major topic and a major focus area, and I think well understood, you know, much like marketing or accounting was when I was going through school. I think everyone's done a nice job putting supply chain in focus in the undergrad academic world, and we would just ask that you continue to do that. I would also ask that you continue to promote the benefits of supply chain collaboration and data sharing. I think you probably have all done academic research that points to the benefits of this. And we continually encounter professionals out there who think they want to keep their data and their information a secret, that they're going to get leverage in every buying negotiation if they keep their information to themselves. And yet, time and time again, when we see that more people are sharing and collaborating, in the end, they build a more efficient supply chain, and that more efficient supply chain actually leads to cost savings for everyone. And so we are obviously big proponents of data, information sharing, and collaboration. And the last area that would be good for us, for you to continue to focus on, is the advancing the use of artificial intelligence and data science technologies in their application in supply chain. One of the benefits that we have of operating a vast network with hundreds of thousands of participants and millions of transactions is that we have a massive amount of data on our network. And unlike many organizations, data is not our challenge. It's the right technologies that we can apply to the specific use cases our customers have to take advantage of that data. And I think that as the world advances both technologically in these areas, but also from a application of the technologies and specific use cases for supply chain, we're going to see more and more positive things come out of these technologies in the way that they impact the supply chain. And I believe a lot of this is going to be driven, certainly it'll be driven commercially, but I believe the academic world is going to play a big role. So it would help us, it would help our business, it would help our future collaboration with the academic world if you guys can continue to focus in these areas. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
My question is, do you think there's a downside to the transparency and visibility that everyone is talking about in supply chain? And I can give you an example if you'd like. So for example, if you are managing inventory and you see a temporary drop, would that signal initiate extra buying from other buyers in the supply chain, especially in an open system where you can see inventory on your platform? Thank you.
Yeah, I do think that could happen to the extent it was open. So the way at least our network is constructed is that the connections between trading partners are sort of managed, and so the data sharing is limited to those trading partners that you would want to share data with. And so this idea that because some of these allocation scenarios and other things do get quite complex and are very important also to the customer relationship going forward. So we try to preserve what people can see, especially in terms of inventory availability, to only the participants that it makes sense for them to share with.
And I have a question on the middle bullet that you have here. And in particular, what we also teach is that it is not enough to just get the access to the data, but oftentimes sharing forecasting routines make sense. So that, for example, your buyers and your suppliers make the same conclusion from the information that they see.
Yes.
Does your platform provide these type of services? And if so, then in doing that, do you kind of look into the broader data that a particular connection would have? Let's say, would you use the data from another retailer who is selling the same supplier's goods to make a better prediction?
Yeah, to be honest, most of what we are doing now is focused on getting all the parties the right information to make the decision, versus providing a platform for them to collaborate on the decision. So admittedly, we're not that mature yet in terms of how we're helping customers, because we're more collaborating on the information as opposed to the actual decision-making process. Now, that said, I think the more immediate need seems to be around just getting everybody the information so they can make their more independent decisions. But I certainly would hope we could get to the point where the decision-making process could actually be facilitated by our platform and therefore be more collaborative. Yeah.
Hi. I read somewhere that in one of the papers that the e-commerce operations, right, for omni channels are separate from retail operations. And I guess that's what your company does, right, in terms of integrating all these systems together to have a common sort of visibility across all the channels. I'm quite curious why e-commerce, why there are different separate like information channels, because conceptually the e-commerce is just front end, so it can just tap on the back end of the legacy systems, for the logistics and for the information. But why do they need to set it up as a separate channel? And then why do you need to integrate that, into the whole visibility? Because you just build on top of the existing platform that they already have.
Yeah, so what we find is many of the systems and processes that are designed for wholesale fulfillment are not satisfactory to deal with the one unit small shipments that come from the e-commerce business, or I should say more broadly, the direct to consumer. So really direct to consumer now is not just kind of e-commerce, it's also very heavy on this drop shipping, where somebody else's e-commerce site is getting the order and sending it to you. We're also seeing quite a bit come from marketplaces, where people are listing their products on marketplaces. And a lot of the systems to support the wholesale channel are really designed to assume you're going to ship full cartons and full cases, even full truckloads. And so when you get to that level of detail, a lot of times the business process does need to be different for direct to consumer. I would also say we still, although we're seeing it merge more, especially in the supply chain organization, we did historically see where organizations to respond to e-commerce demand were actually setting up separate e-commerce business units and really operating those business units separately from, say, the main retail business. That trend is kind of going away, but it's not that everything's been moved back yet.
One of the points you made in your presentation is that you've seen, successive growth over many quarters. And I'm trying to understand the value proposition in terms of what the different companies you work with get from you. For example, we talk about traditional ERP systems. Are you different from them? Or my question may be a little naive here, or, how do you compete with those? That's one of my questions. The second one has to do with how companies that work with you are able to evaluate the value you bring in terms of, profitability. So for example, if we use your services, how does it improve the organization's bottom line? Yep. Is there a way for you to be able to assess that, or for your customers to be able to assess that?
Yeah. So to your first question about the types of systems. So we really operate a network that allows you to connect with trading partners outside your organization. So if a company has an ERP system managing most of the supply chain operations inside their organization, that they need to be able to send information about inventory and orders to others. And rather than do that via email or other approaches, they can do that across our network. And then their ERP system actually connects with our network and can work back and forth. So think of our network as the way to connect outside the four walls of your organization. So therefore, we actually have a lot of partnerships with ERP companies to make sure that that integration between the ERP system and our network works effectively, and it's easy for customers to onboard into the network. In terms of some of the business benefits, I'll speak to the benefits on the retail side because those are probably most obvious. But by gaining predictable shipments from your suppliers, by having inbound order visibility, by being able to share actual point of sale data with your suppliers, that allows you to make more efficient supply chain planning decisions, which will reduce stock outs, which then should increase sales overall. It should also allow you to operate from a lower inventory position by having more predictable inventory and better inventory visibility.
All right. Thank you, Chad, for everything.
Thank you, KK.
Let's give him a warm. All this reminds us that Chad is today's CEO, and looking forward to having CEOs like him is how much they straddle between the forest and the trees. I mean, they strategize, but they execute. And just the level of depth and detail that they know about the people, process, and technology is absolutely heartwarming and inspiring. So he clearly has challenged us. There's work cut out for us, but we are in this together. So thank you, Chad, for this inspirational and very informative talk. I would like to now invite our president, Professor Subodh Kumar, to recognize our speaker. This is he gets to, you get a plaque, Chad.
Wow.
I wish you could give you a degree, but we give you a plaque.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And also I want to acknowledge Chad's colleagues up here. Thank you for having the front row seat. Nicole, Melissa, Matt, and Jenya. Thank you very much. And we'll have to.
Thank you again, Chad. And this is so you will have access of